Hey, all, today we are going to take those shortcuts for showing triangles are congruent, and we're going to use them to write two-column proofs like we have in the past. So let me explain the setup here because it might be a little overwhelming at first, and then we'll go through it. So we have some given information about these two triangles, and then we have something we want to prove. And in this case, we want to prove that this triangle PQR is congruent to the triangle on the right, STR. And so, of course, we have the picture, and down here we have the two columns set up, and I have some of the spaces filled in. It might look similar to the test you took on parallel lines, where we had some of the spaces filled in, and you just have to fill in the blanks. And then this stuff on the right are your choices for the blanks, and we can drag them and put them in the right spot. So let's walk through this. We'll walk through a few together. I'll ask you to do one, and then we'll talk about it at the beginning of next class, and then we'll obviously do some practice in class. So the first thing I always encourage you to do when you have some given information and you have some pictures is to mark up the pictures with the given information so we can create a picture that looks like something we've been dealing with. So it says that PQ is congruent to ST, so I'm going to mark PQ and ST. Then it says QR is congruent to TR, and so I'll mark those. And then it says R is the midpoint of PS. So R right here is the midpoint of segment PS. If R is the midpoint of that big long segment, that means that these two smaller segments, PR and RS, are congruent. So we're going to put that on the picture, and then we're going to have to justify these two segments being congruent within our proof, and I'll show you how to do that. So if you've taken the given information and marked the picture up like I have, you can see it looks similar to something we've been working on. It looks like we have three pairs of congruent sides. And so my goal would be to prove these two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. So we're already able to start filling in this proof. I know at the end of this, when I say these two triangles are congruent, I want them to be congruent by side, side, side. Notice here I have two reasons are given, and so I have three pieces of given information. So in this proof, I've decided to put all three givens on a different line. And so my first given is PQ congruent to ST. My next one is QR is congruent to TR, so we're going to grab that and we'll put it over here. And then our last given is that R is the midpoint of PS, and that's already on the statement side, so we'll put our reason it was given to us. So this thing's almost already done. We just have one more row to fill in. We've put in all of our givens. The last thing is always the thing we're trying to prove. And we've already decided we're going to show the two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. So we have to walk through that last part where we said, since this was the midpoint, these two segments are congruent. So I'm going to grab the statement that says PR is congruent to SR. We understood that to be true because R was the midpoint of PS, and so we can justify saying these two things are congruent because of the definition of what it is to be a midpoint. So there we are. We've filled out our proof using three pieces of given information, taking this piece of given information that R is the midpoint and figuring out something else. Well, those two segments PR and SR are congruent. That's because that's what it means to be a midpoint. We have three pairs of sides that are congruent, and so therefore the two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. So let's try another one. Again, I want to mark my picture up with the given information. It'll lead me to the postulate or theorem that I want to use at the end to justify that the two triangles are congruent. So I have XW congruent to XY, and it says XZ segment XZ, this one that goes through the middle, bisects angle WXY, WXY. So this big angle in my quadrilateral is getting cut in half, and so that means, that's what it means to bisect, by the way. That means that those two smaller angles, one in each triangle, are congruent. And then we'll also still look for things like reflexive property and vertical angles, and hopefully you've noticed we have reflexive property right there. And so it looks like to me, if we look at this picture like we have been in the past, that this is a side angle side congruence. And so I'm going to go right down to my last row. The last statement I always want to make is that the two triangles are congruent, so I'll grab that. And I've already figured out I want to show they're congruent by side angle side. So I have my final statement and reason completed. XW being congruent to XY, that was something I was given. And then I was given one more thing, that XZ bisects angle WXY. So I'll put that in there for my next statement because it was given. We decided that this segment XZ was congruent to itself by reflexive property. There's my reason, reflexive property. So we'll grab that XZ is congruent to itself. And then we decided that WXZ and YXZ, these two angles were congruent because when something bisects an angle, it makes two congruent smaller angles. And that's just using this phrase, definition of an angle bisector. So we're just filling in the blanks here, using some things we've worked with before in different two-column proofs, and also using the congruent triangles methods we've used for the last couple classes. So I want you to see if you can try this one. I would copy down the picture, the given, and the things to prove, and then I will scroll down. So pause, copy that. I'll bring all this stuff down so you can see the two columns and the options and try and fill in this proof. So hopefully you copied the picture, the given and the proof, marked up the picture, and then we're able to see the statements, reasons, and the options. So again, I'm going to mark up my picture with what I know. It says QR, segment QR bisects angle PQS. Angle PQS is this big angle on the top, and it's being bisected, so that means that those two angles are congruent. It says that angle PRQ, that's this one, and angle SRQ are congruent. And then of course we have reflexive properties. So this looks like an angle side angle congruence. So I would, oh, and it already says angle side angle. We can just drop our congruent triangles there. The first piece of given information will go here for statements. QR bisects angle PQS. These two angles being congruent were given to us. We know that QR is congruent to itself because of reflexive property. And lastly, if my reason is definition of angle bisector, I'm going to be trying to state something about two congruent angles, and this is our only choice. Those were those two angles that we said were congruent. So I want you to try this one, do the best you can, and we'll go over it at the beginning of next class. So first things first, copy the given, the proof, and the picture, and I'll shift everything down and scroll down so you can see the two-column proof. So there you go. Give it a shot, and we'll talk about it in class.